chances are, if you decided to tune into this video, you have either experienced or heard about the prevalent abuses of power that can occur in shamanic ceremonies in spaces like ayahuasca and wachuma. So either you've been the recipient of unwanted sexual energy, manipulation, projections, lack of integrity, etc., that can happen in these spaces, or perhaps you've just heard the many stories of these things occurring, both from the spectrum of just slight grievances all the way up to full-scale abuse and trauma. So I want to address that today, but I want to address it in a way that is maybe not as talked about. I myself and many other much more intelligent people have actually talked in depth about the abuse of power that happens with people in authority. And shamans are unique in that not only do they hold authority in some spaces, but they're also considered healers. And so therefore, not only is there power to abuse, but it's from people that we go to actually for help in healing. And I myself, as any plant person, as any advocate for the ethical and empowering medicine that these plants offer, I get my heart broken every time I hear that someone goes into a space for healing and becomes extremely vulnerable and ends up having more trauma to heal from. Now, I of course accept and hold that everything that happens is there for us to learn and to grow from, and we are never victims, but I still want the space of ayahuasca to actually be healing. So this is why I'm doing this video, is to kind of talk about the empowerment that we can bring to ourselves, any of us that feel fearful around potentially being the recipient of these unwanted advances and energies, etc. Because it's not a matter of just crossing our fingers and hoping things go well and that our intuition led us into a place of learning from love instead of learning from chaos and conflict. Understood all is equal, but one is more preferable, right? But we don't just have to cross our fingers and hope it goes well. There are things that we can understand in our own psychology that will vastly better the odds that things are going to be beneficially healing rather than traumatic. So the first thing that is super prominent that I want to talk about, that I myself have done many times in my journey, is this whole aspect of giving away our power, which right away does not create a space of safety for either person, by the way, because it's not out of integrity. Anytime there's a hierarchy, in other words, we've given somebody a pedestal of I hold you as more powerful or more divine as me, and therefore give you a space of power over my sovereignty, that's a recipe for some sort of disaster in one way or another. So we as individuals can hold ourselves responsible for catching that desire to give somebody a pedestal. And a pedestal creates the hierarchy. I know that with one of my teachers in particular, I gave him such a massive pedestal straight up into the cosmos that really looking back, there was only one way for him to go. He was going to have to come tumbling off of that. Did he willingly accept the pedestal and even get extreme delight off of it? Yeah, probably. That's okay. That's his business. My business is the part where I not just willingly, but I was very stubborn about holding him in this higher space. And what that does is it creates an environment where the individual with the pedestal is held to a place of almost not being human. This is one of the reasons why I really don't support medicine spaces that are more about guru worship than they are about medicine partnership, medicine reverence. Because when it's about the individual and the whole collective has given them a pedestal, there's a lot of just dysfunction and karma and hierarchy and nasty human stuff that is getting worked out in that. All valuable, but stuff that I personally don't want to play with anymore. I really noticed this is prevalent in my time in the jungle, especially with my very first teacher and shaman. Another person I gave a big, massive pedestal to. And it was so tempting because he helped me so tremendously to heal some physical and emotional things that I honestly didn't even think were possible. So it's really very tempting to then hold this person in a sort of holier space because of the magic that has happened. But what happened because of that, as a result of this hierarchy, is he misread the energy that I was giving him of reverence and took that, I'm assuming, as an invitation for a sexual connection. What had happened is one morning we did a flower bath, which is this amazing process that especially occurs in the jungle after an ayahuasca ceremony of cleansing and coming back into your body. And it either involves being in a bathing suit or nothing at all. And I had done this with him several times, many times actually, but I did another experience of the flower bath and he forcibly kissed me in the middle of it. Right away, when it happened, my initial response was to go into victim consciousness of, oh my God, how could this happen? It felt like such a violation. And it was violent. I mean, I was so vulnerable and I didn't actually want this to occur. However, as soon as that thought around being a victim came in, the wisdom of ayahuasca came in next. And she said, hold on a second. There's an opportunity here. Your choice. Here's your two choices. Number one, you can choose to own that perspective of you've just been harmed, pour you, and not to diminish the pain and the betrayal that was occurring. But the second choice was you can see this as a teaching moment. You can own your responsibility of what you did to co-create this, which is what I'm examining now with you. And you can let it be a lesson rather than a trauma. You can be a lesson that hurts, and that's going to take some emotion to process, but it doesn't have to become a story of victim and perpetrator. And I don't have to villainize this person who I just held in the highest possible space, then now to make him a devil, because the truth is he was neither. He was always human. So I took her advice and chose option 2, and I'm so glad that I did. Now I want to emphasize I don't diminish the necessary karmic repercussions for any choice that is a violation of somebody else's personal safety. But that's not my business. That's the universe's business and the individual. And karma played out. And it was beautiful as it always is. But my business is how I react and work to it. And so I went to work at this whole process of taking accountability. And I see this happen a lot in the indigenous spaces where, especially the Western people like myself, we come and we have these profound healings, these amazing experiences, and that temptation to make the shaman a god rather than a human is really intense. And it creates this dynamic where the energies get misread, as they did with my beautiful teacher and shaman. And again, we're both accountable. But it's really beautiful to recognize there is the space of responsibility so that when we go into these healing circles, even if we have these miraculous, amazing healings, we can remember that really it comes from the relationship between us, the medicine, and the facilitator. It's co-created. Nobody gets all of the credit. Really, the vast majority of the credit lies on the person who is doing the work of healing themselves. As facilitators, we're just vessels and conduits of the energy. And of course, the medicine is the medicine. She is miraculous. He, if you're using wachuma, they, if you're using mushrooms, etc. But the point is that it's not the wizardry of the shaman, and to allow them to be human, allow them to have shadows, allow them to have things that are just out of integrity, because it's not fair to set them up on a pedestal and expect anything less. And then we turn around and act like victims because they didn't follow suit and act perfect. So that's number one. The way in which we can keep ourselves safe is to not allow that hierarchy. Number two is the core of the training that we receive as facilitators, and that is around just personal protection, which is just a space of empowerment, of owning that we're sovereign as beings and that we're not okay with any human or entity or energy invading our space and causing harm. So half of the things on my altar when I do ceremony work are for protection in various ways. And protection is just a state of consciousness. It is not one thing that we do. It's an energy that we bring in of empowerment. The analogy that I like to make around this is if any of you have ever taken self-defense courses, one of the things that they teach is if a person is coming near you and they feel threatening, look at them. Make eye contact. Make sure they're aware that you see them and that you're aware of their presence, because that right away is an empowering moment that is likely to create a feeling that you're not a victim. So The same is true for the energetic spaces, that we're working in with spirits, etc. Is we want to be aware, but not afraid. So it's not a matter of being naive or being in denial of the fact that the spirit world is very real, but it's about allowing us the opportunity and the empowerment of feeling safe. So that can happen through crystals. It can happen through smokes like sage and Palo Santo. It can happen through mantras, meditations, visualizations, all kinds of ways. This is kind of the core of a lot of the coaching I do for people, is to help them create the sense of safety, not just in ceremony, but in the world. But that's another way in which we can protect ourselves from even the fear of feeling like we are going to be taken advantage of in a vulnerable place like ayahuasca. And lastly, certainly not least, is the experience of trusting our intuition. I am absolutely positive every single one of you have had the experience of having an intuition around something maybe not being safe or not being for your highest good, not following that, and then having the repercussions of, why didn't I listen to my intuition? Listening to intuition is dicey in a way, because our minds want tangible evidence that what our intuition is saying is validated. So what we typically do is we're like, well, okay, as an example, this space doesn't feel safe. Well, prove it to me. So we'll go into the space, we'll investigate it, we'll even potentially allow ourselves to become vulnerable, only to find out that our intuition was true in some way. And now we have maybe the validation of being right, yay, but potentially a trauma to now heal from. Where instead, what we could do, this is what I encourage, is if the ayahuasca has this expression to me of like, honey, if there's smoke, there's fire. Meaning that if you smell smoke, i.e. your intuition says there's something here that might not be safe for you, you can let that be true for you and trust that. You don't have to have it validated and make it true for anyone else, or to even like confront someone around it. You can just say, this doesn't feel good. And you have so many choices when it comes to ayahuasca ceremonies, shamanic experiences, that you don't have to settle. You should never settle, even if you didn't have choices, and compromise and put yourself into a space that doesn't feel safe. Because the truth is, we can learn in any way. And it is just as divine to learn in a space of chaos and trauma as it is in love and safety. But let's face it, one is more fun and preferable to the parts of us that are in duality. And this way, we can hold ourselves accountable as not consciously co-creating the dynamic of victim versus perpetrator. Nobody wins in that scenario. And rather than just putting it all off on people are bad, people do bad things, we can remember that we also are responsible for everything that we're calling into our space. So thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me to share this potentially controversial and sort of different perspective around empowerment. I by no means, am in any way excusing the behaviors that happen in ceremony. I have been the recipient of these. I have witnessed many conversations with coaching clients and the really ugly traumas that can happen. And I'm from a lineage that honestly carries a tremendous amount of sexual abuse of women. And so I'm very passionate about creating more safe spaces. So while I hold all of them accountable, the thing that I can control more is how we ourselves are responsible for our own safety. I know that's made me feel so much more powerful, so much more embodied by self-love, as I've taken that as a core responsibility. No one else is going to keep me safe. I get to do it. And there's so many incredible ways to do so. So if this is something that you are working with or struggle with and you feel called to contact me and ask for my support or advice, please do. You can email me, you can reach out in the comments below, or you can go to kat@afterlife.coach. That's my email address, and then afterlife.coach is my website if you want to learn more and have a partner in protection. Regardless, I wish you safe, delicious healing journeys in all your shamanic spaces, and I deeply thank you for spending this time with me. Much love and journey well.